All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Circuit Judge Brantford Winston Worth. This is Circuit Judge Sunny Day Kavanaugh and Circuit Judge Clarkson. And the three of us are sitting by designation today as appointed by the Supreme Court for the purposes of this appeal. We're thankful to everyone for coming, and of course, those at the gallery are welcome to be seated. So for those of you who are not familiar, the appeals process is slightly different in terms of hearings than the underlying trial process is. For the purposes of appellate argument, each party will have 30 minutes to make their argument. The appellant may reserve up to 5 of those minutes for rebuttal. And once the appellant has made their, anywhere from 25 to 30-minute argument, the appellee, in this case the state, will have the opportunity to make their 30-minute argument, after which case any reserved rebuttal may be utilized by the appellant. So just to get things started, I want to remind everyone to be professional and courteous. The standard courtroom rules do apply today. It seems like we have a lovely group of respectful people in the gallery, and for that we are thankful. And first, if we could ask the appellant to please state their name for the record. Yes, it is.
Hi, I'm Luka.
And what is your last name, Luka?
Pericic.
Pericic? Did I say that right?
Honestly, you were close as anyone never been.
Oh, that's pretty good. Thank you. I will aspire to do better if you keep helping us pronounce it.
Hear me out. Luka is perfect.
Oh, Luka. Okay. All right. Well, with your permission, sir, we will call you Luka. Thank you.
Please do.
And then the appellee, please state your name for the record.
Sergeant Mo Gilgully.
I'll say that one more time. I think the recording was having a hard time picking you up.
No worries. Sergeant Mo Gilgully.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. All right. Beautiful. Does anyone have any pre-hearing matters for us to address, or shall we get right into it? Luka, do you have anything?
I have no idea what that means.
All right, great. And then Mr. Gilgully?
I have nothing pre-trial from the state, Your Honor.
All right, perfect. Again, to be clear, this is not a trial. It's an appellate hearing, but just making sure that everyone is on the same page, because I understand that both of the parties are perhaps less familiar with the specific kind of proceeding. So we want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. All right. I'm going to get a timer together. So again, Mr. Luka, you're going to go first. Do you understand what I mean when I say that you can reserve up to 5 minutes for rebuttal?
Yes.
All right, great. I am going to rely on you to track that. I'm going to have my own timer here. And by the way, you don't have to use the entire 30 minutes, but we are going to interrupt and ask questions here and there. That is something that differs from the standard process in an appellate hearing. The judges are very proactive, I would say. And so, if you want to track your own time and you notice that we're getting close to eating into your 5 minutes, you're welcome to reserve as much or as little of that as you want for your, rebuttal period. All right?
Okay.
All right, give me 1 second to put my timer together. All right, Mr. Luka, you may approach the podium, and I'll start the timer when you start speaking.
Okay, so do you want me to go with the things that I posted in the thing?
Well, this is your argument, Mr. Luka. This is your opportunity to both supplement your brief and to raise any additional points to the court, as well as to make a record on appeal.
To make a... What kind of record are we talking about? Am I
well, this
something?
is being recorded, right? And so this is your opportunity to have it, in the record and publicly visible what your arguments are, in perhaps a way that you either did not or could not capture in writing. And certainly, we might have some questions as well, but we like to give people the opportunity to maybe make a little statement and summarize their points before we really get into it.
Okay. Sure. Okay, so today we are here because of things, right? Terrible things. And I don't know where to start, so I will just start with the things. So I have been arrested for illegal parking again. But now it's even less of a thing than it was before. I have not done a single thing that would be against the definition of the criminal thing or whatever, the legal description of the parking. I have been nowhere close to a fire hydrant to whatever the legal limit is. I have not been blocking alleyway. I have. What is there? What's the rest here? Okay, well, yeah, that's about it. There is nowhere a definition of parking space, so I don't know how someone can try to enforce that.
All right, Mr. Luka, let me ask you a question.
Okay,
there are
try
some
me.
photos that got posted to the docket that you may have seen. Now, I want to be clear that the one that was presented on the 11th of August, that labeled one, that certainly will not be considered on appeal because no new evidence is ever accepted for the purposes of appeal. Okay.
Yes.
But I want to ask you, and you know, you should consider that you're speaking before the court, and I understand that you're familiar with the concept of contempt, but we don't really want to go down that road today if we can help it. These photos from July 12th, were these introduced in the underlying trial? And I will be asking Mr. Gilgully the same question.
12? I have no idea. Let me see what was there on
The
12th.
12th of July. So this is going to be on docket line number 7 of the appeal, where you had major arguments. Now, these were originally submitted by Mr. McKnight, who I understand is no longer with the Department of Justice. If they were never submitted in the underlying trial, then the court will not consider them for the purposes of appeal. But we need to know whether they were.
The ones from July 12th were in the trial,
Yeah.
as far as I know.
They were, yes? That's a
Yes.
yes? All right, perfect. Thank you. You can keep going.
Yeah, so like on those pictures, you can see that according to the car manufacturer and everything, as what I said in the brief, like the axle split is over 8 feet, which would be similar length to the fire hydrant, which is more than 5. So like I don't. There was no reason to be trying to be charged for illegal parking. And then,
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Luka. Under your definition of illegal parking, wouldn't it be possible for people to simply park everywhere, all over the city, and it would be considered legal?
well, that's why the city has all the no parking signs, right?
Well, sure,
that are
but
being
I mean,
used.
I understand this is part of your argument, right? But help me understand.
Right.
In your proposal, the city would be required to manufacture, put up, and maintain. And this is a really big one for me because I'm sure you understand people are not respective of city property in this state. I mean, they knock over signs all the time. I'm sure you've seen it. So your proposal is that in order to enforce any parking at all under the current rule, or even under a hypothetical rule, the state would have to maintain all of these parking signs, especially when they're getting knocked over all the time. I mean, how would that possibly be reasonable for the state to enforce?
So what you are trying to say is, A, city should restrict the labor of people. So, there is not enough space on the labor market. That's why public works are around. That's why manufacturers of those signs are around. That's their living. Are you trying to say that people should not be working?
How much steel are we going to spend on putting up and replacing parking signs if we're going to essentially Mr. Gilgully's argument is only those designated parking spots, with the white lines or parking lots or what have you, should be considered as legal to park in. That's I imagine what he's going to get up here and say. And I understand your position and I understand his position. But from what I understand about your argument, in order to achieve his proposed regime, we would have to go put up illegal parking signs on every block of the entire city thereabouts, in order to avoid people leaving their cars out all over the place, which seems to be what the city is getting at with this citation as written. Now, I understand your argument, but do you really think that is cost effective?
But do you really think that enforcing something that is not in the definition of a law is the right thing to do? If you want something to be enforced, make the definition proper.
Well, so here's where the courts come in, Mr. Luka. The court's job is to make best efforts to understand and interpret the statutes as presented by the legislature. Wouldn't you agree?
I don't know what that means, so sure.
Oh, okay. So we have state representatives in this state. You understand?
Barely we do, but okay.
Well, certainly. I'll leave that commentary to you. I'm not going to necessarily agree with it or not, but you understand that they do exist, and you understand that their job is to update the laws, right?
Okay.
And you understand that these laws, as written, were originally passed by the state representatives, right?
Okay.
All right. And you understand that the judiciary does not, write the penal code, right?
Yeah.
So each team has its own job. The state representatives write the laws, and then, someone says, well, the law's not clear enough, or, I think based on the way the law is written that I'm not guilty of this offense. And we say, okay, well, we'll consider your argument. But no matter what phrasing the legislature gives us, our job, as we understand it at least, is to give credence to the effort made by the legislature and to attempt to interpret those laws in a way that more or less aligns with the legislature's intent and also helps to set expectations reasonably for the state. Our job is to keep the state running. From my perspective, and perhaps my colleagues disagree, I'm speaking only for myself, but from my perspective, it would be improper for the court to impose upon the state a ridiculously large financial burden because the legislature maybe failed to include a particular word here or there. Our job is to give credit to the legislature's efforts and intentions. And I don't understand why you're arguing that the legislature must have intended that they would want to spend much more money than they actually allocated to such a project.
Okay, I had great thought in mind, but it already disappeared. But how do you
I'm sorry.
How do you expect me to pay for something that is nowhere said illegal?
Well, I think it does say in the penal code that it's illegally parked in city limits if it's parked in a place that is not a parking space or blocking an alley line. So in this case, the allegation is obviously that you were blocking or that you were not in a parking space. There's no white line, right? Like there's no. No. I think you made this point about there not being a meter there, and that's one thing I understand. But more specifically, it's not marked. Would you agree?
90% of the parking spots are not marked.
What do you mean by that? I would love to hear more about this.
You have parking space in front of the courthouse. It is not marked. Everyone parks there.
That's an interesting point. We'll have to go investigate that. But more specifically, it is designed with infrastructure, right? So you understand that there's there's bump outs and cutouts.
Can I? Because I will forget.
Oh, of course. Go ahead.
You say it is built that way. This area where I was parking is in front of the clothing store that has a lot of traffic, and the road is wide enough to fit.
I've actually been over to that clothing store, Mr. Luka. There's a parking lot right across the street?
Yeah, further away for other businesses.
Well, it's about like 100 feet, right?
I don't know how feet work.
30 meters?
Oh, that's definitely more than 40 meters.
How many meters would you say it is?
I would say like 100, 150.
All right, 100 meters. You think you should have to walk fewer than 100 meters for anywhere that you're ever going?
100%.
Wow.
All right, so your position is that you're entitled to park somewhere if there's no other parking within 100 meters. Is that what you're proposing to the court?
No, I'm proposing parking in the safe spot that does not go against the fucking red lines, the fire hydrants, blocking alleyways or whatever, and not blocking a traffic.
Well, I don't think that there's any disagreement about the fact that there was no red line here. So let's not get caught up in that, right? And I don't think there's any argument being made that you were necessarily impeding the flow of traffic with where you
There
were
was
parked.
argument being made against that as yes, if I remember
Oh,
right.
well, then we'll wait to see what Mr. Gilgully has to say. But even if we were to take those things for granted, part of the issue here is that it's not a marked parking space, and I don't think there's any indication that there was an intention for vehicles to be parked there. What do you have to say to that?
So what you are saying, anything that is not a marked space should be illegal parking?
Well, that's what Mr. Gilgully is saying. And just to be clear, our job for the purposes of appeal is to ask you both a very extended series of difficult questions. We want to push this thing as far as it can go on both sides. So it's not that we're picking on you, Mr. Luka. I fully intend to do the same to Mr. Gilgully. I want to be very clear about that.
Oh, I get it. But hear me out. Street is wide enough, right? Not blocking anything, not going over the lines, fire hydrants, anything, but not blocking, literally not blocking traffic at all. You can put literally bigger thing that is a semi-truck to drive around with no issues, not swerving into a different lane.
Do you don't think that a semi-truck would have to cross the yellow lines in order
No.
to pass your vehicle safely?
Definitely no. There is
All right, and how should law enforcement consider the standard on a go forward basis? So let's say that we implement the Mr. Luka standard for illegal parking, and on a go forward basis, officers are required to consider your standard for how to evaluate whether a vehicle is parked legally or illegally. Can you walk me through the steps that they should take to determine whether or not a vehicle is parked legally?
use their brain.
Mr. Luka, I appreciate that comment. Don't get me wrong, but I need you to help me with something more specific because this court is required to articulate specific standards. That's how we do law.
Specific standards, huh? Don't be a danger
Yes,
to society.
yes, sir. Okay. So when an officer comes upon a vehicle and wants to determine whether it's illegally parked, step one is don't be a danger to society. Is that right?
100%. Let's go towards the cop. But first is
all
the
right.
use the brain. But we already
First,
agree
use
that
the
that
brain.
would be-
Second,
yeah.
don't be a danger to society. Okay.
Mhm.
And what about when an officer says, "Well, I used my brain and I determined that vehicle was a danger to society"? How can the courts consider, based on this standard, whether or not someone was a danger to society?
And you see, this is why I'm not a lawyer.
Well, I understand, but we do need your help in order to figure out what the rules should be here. You
Okay,
see
so
the
we
issue?
should go probably by the thing that says in the thing, not blocking things mainly.
Okay,
in my
all
opinion.
right. Not blocking things. I think that's
not
a good
blocking
start.
anything, like blocking doors, blocking alleyways, blocking access, blocking
Right.
the road, blocking ducklings from crossing the road.
And how do we determine whether or not a vehicle is blocking the road? What should be the standard for that?
Tape measure.
Tape measure. So under your proposal, anytime an officer sees a vehicle parked on the side of the road, they should stop their car, get out with a tape measure. And what should they measure?
That really depends on the day. They can measure how good they are feeling, but they should probably measure how far to the things are.
And
How
when they
far
say
to the
when you
things
say
are?
they should measure how far the things are, specifically what things are they measuring, and how far apart should those things be?
They are measuring everything. They need to measure every smallest thing that could be blocked or in the way.
I see. Every single smallest thing that could be blocked or in the way. And how far away should a car be from every single thing that could be blocked or in the way?
It's a very good question. What units do you want it in?
We could do meters or feet, your preference.
Let me do calculation.
You guys should feel free to chime in at any time.
You're taking
No,
many,
literally interrupt me. That's what this
many
is
of
for.
my points, and I don't want to interrupt neither.
No, please interrupt.
Okay,
It's
so-
more fun if you interrupt.
I'm looking at car specs right now, and I would say about 2 meters to the center of the road.
2
and the-
meters from the car or from the sidewalk?
From the edge of the car.
Okay,
So you can
all
safely
right.
pass around it without going into
To the middle of the
incorrect
road, you
lane.
said.
Yes.
I see. Okay.
And then it would depend what everything else you want to count. If you want to go with the fire hydrants, red lines, sidewalks.
Oh,
all the-
let me, can I
Uh-huh.
clarify here? You said, so, an officer should get out and measure 2 meters to make sure you have room to pass any parked car. Is that what you're saying? Just to clarify?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so if a car is parked on the side of the road, they should pull up alongside you, and if they don't have 2 meters between your car and their car, then it's illegal parking, according to your
Wait, what?
statement.
What do you mean between my car and their car?
Am
I
I
will need more-
misunderstanding this, Bradford?
I will need more description
I think
on how
you said 2 meters from the edge of his car to the middle of the road. So like 2 meters of open space.
Okay. I thought he said 2 meters to have room to pass.
No, I
You
don't.
see,
I
Mr.
don't
Luca,
mean
it's
like-
very important to be precise.
Yeah, I know, and that's why we are here.
Exactly.
And I have one more question, because earlier you talked about, time and money and, resources to check out, illegally parked cars that aren't in the way. Do you not think it would be a use of time and resources to go up to every vehicle and measure, as you put it, everything?
Okay, hear me out, Willow. If they go to a crime that they want to stop, they still all do the things that they need to do to stop the crime. This is the same thing. Are
So
we
you're
trying to
alleging
categorize
that
it in
a crime
different
is
things?
being taken place then?
Well, they think it is. And if they think crime is being taken place, shouldn't they go through the steps?
Which means they have enough PC to question you and request your identity if you're in the vicinity of this said crime being taken place?
Not what I'm talking about. You are putting words in your mouth.
I am simply going off some of your statements that are in your own appellate brief.
Okay.
Did you not state that they did not have the PC to question you and identify you?
They didn't try to question me.
You did state that they tried to identify you.
Yeah, but they didn't try to question me.
Okay, but identifying you is questioning you because they're asking you who you are.
Mr. Luca, did you hear Miss
Yeah, I
Clarkson?
did.
Do you have any response?
That I'm disappointed in her
Oh, why is that?
because of Killian.
Mr. Luca, I would like it that we keep the conversation today
sorry.
limited to the case at hand. I think it's improper to comment on the personal lives of the panel that is before you. Do you understand?
Sure. Don't worry, I would comment on you as well if I knew you.
Let me
I'm
read your
certain
exact.
that you would. I'm certain that you would.
Let me read your exact words back to you, Mr. Luca. It says here, right here, August 10th, in your appellate brief. Furthermore, if there was no illegal parking violation, there was not PC for identifying me, and there would never be any trial thingy thing.
Okay, but did he try to question the car?
Well, we will ask him
I don't
if
think
he
a
tried
car
to
can ask.
question
Yeah,
the
I don't think
car
a
when
car
he
can
came
answer
up.
questions, Mr. Luca.
Well, he didn't do proper job, did he?
Mr. Luca, do you think that vehicles can speak English?
100%.
Really? Tell me more about this.
Well, when you go to repair it, they tell you how fucked you are.
And what words do they tell you? What language? Do they speak English? Is it like mental communication? Is it
100%
sign
mental.
language?
What? Willow, come on. Cars cannot do sign language. That would be crazy.
No, I didn't.
Oh,
think they could
Mr.
speak.
Luca,
No.
so you said that the vehicles speak English to you? Like you can understand the words that they're saying?
100%. You don't talk with your car?
Well, I want to be clear. Your statement was that the car talks to you. Is that correct?
Well, usually it's two-way conversation. Otherwise, it would be just crazy.
Well, sure. I understand. But can you tell me some examples of things that your car says to you?
Yo, I'm fucked. I need help.
The car says that to you. That's what the car says?
Yeah, things like that, you know?
And it says that in clear English?
Oh, 100%.
Okay. And is it just your car or is it other cars?
I don't really drive other cars, so probably just mine cars.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
I'll go for it, Sunny, if you have something.
Oh, I would like for him to demonstrate the voice in which the car is speaking to him.
I feel like that would be very impolite to me trying to pretend someone else's voice.
Well, let me ask you this: if the car has a voice of its own, and why did you not have the car come testify on your behalf on the day?
Because
of court?
I can't bring any new witnesses.
No, on the day of court, August 12th.
No, on the bench trial, she's saying.
Oh, because they steal it.
All right. And how often do you talk to your car, Mr. Luca?
Daily.
All right.
All
Did
right.
you request of the courts for them to release your vehicle to subpoena it for a testimony?
No, but they barely took me there.
Okay. All right. Mr. Luca, is there anything else you wanted to argue? You've got 7 minutes left on the timer, so you got 2 minutes if you want to save 5 for rebuttal.
Nah, I'm fine.
All right. Do you want to reserve your remaining time for rebuttal?
Sure, it will probably not be needed, but you never know.
Certainly. All right. You can return to your desk and stick around after court, too. We may want to chat.
Oh, say less.
Oh my god.
Mr. Gilgully, you can approach the podium. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Today, September 15th, 2024, we are discussing a case with a concealed amount of impact on how we interpret the law in San Andreas. Today, on this beautiful Sunday morning, we are genuinely having a large impact on the frankly mundane task of parking in the state of San Andreas. The state, myself, believe there are 2 key factors to the topic today. These are simply, did Luka illegally parked on July 12th? And did law enforcement act in good faith in pursuing this citation? I'd like to first touch on the latter. In the original case, there was multiple eyewitness testimony that I, Mo Gilgully, gave multiple requests for Luka to move their vehicle, and multiple demands for Luka to identify.
All right, Mr. Gilgully, before you get too into it, I just want to resolve a quick procedural item. Mr. Lucas said that the photos from the 12th were introduced during the bench trial. Is that correct?
That is correct. They were submitted as evidence in the original docket. And
all right, is there any other
testimony.
evidence that was submitted on the original docket that may not have been captured?
Yes. Give me 1 second to get that for you, if you do not mind.
Thank you. I see that there was like pockets, but I think the major item of concern here is the photos.
Yes. So there was the possessions. I do not believe any possessions were seized from Luka on that day. So that is not relevant to the appeal here today. There's also some evidence submitted by the defendant, now appellant here, that were of, I believe, vehicles parked out front of the courtroom on the day of the bench trial, which I also I'm happy to speak on, but I do not think is relevant for the case today.
Since he brought it up, why don't you tell us your thoughts?
Well, out front of the courthouse, there are black lines and an indented side road that are the length of a vehicle. I'll get more into it later, but I believe that is sufficient to identify a parking space.
By black lines, do you just mean like the creases between the concrete slabs?
That are conveniently the size of most vehicles, yes.
Okay. All right. I understand what you're saying. I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same quote unquote black lines.
Absolutely.
I wasn't meaning to be insulting. Carry on.
No worries. I did not take it that way, Your Honor.
That resolves my procedural items. You can get back to like whatever your spiel was.
Absolutely. So there was eyewitness testimony that Luka would need to be identified, or they would be placed under arrest. The eyewitness testimony that specifically stated that I said this directly to Luka: if you do not identify, I will arrest you for failure to identify. Those were words that were said, in which Luka did not comply. They continued to not comply. Law enforcement would not have made the simple request repeatedly multiple times if the law was pursued in bad faith. For this reason, the charge of failure to identify should uphold, even if it is found by you today that the parking was legal. And I think it goes without saying that the contempt of court should not be appealed, as the Honorable Doc Hillard's courtroom was disrespected by Luka multiple times, and that is irrelevant to the charges he was being faced on that day.
Can you elaborate a little on those situations?
On the contempt,
Yeah.
I believe Luka, based off my memory, was had quite the sailor's mouth in Doc's courtroom that day, and it was warned multiple times to keep the cursing outside of this courtroom, and they failed to do so, and thus was found in contempt.
And did you in fact question the vehicle? No.
I did not at any point question the vehicle
And why is that?
because I do not think that it is sane to question a vehicle.
All right.
Mr.
Noted
Goldwell,
for the
is
courts. Thank you.
it your argument today that the vehicle is not capable of speaking English? I just want to get to the bottom of this.
I think that other than programmed, I guess, voice to text and such on the console, I mean, there's some fancy cars that do that, but I do not think the car is capable of answering questions from law enforcement in regards to the law. No.
All right, thank you.
They might say fuel tank low sometimes.
Mr. Giugoli, hello there. Question, you say you're pursuing this citation in good faith. This citation was being the illegal parking, yes?
Correct.
And what were the standards that you are using to apply this citation of illegal parking?
Well, I do have my own opinion on that I'm happy to share with the court today.
Yeah, we want to hear it.
So the second topic that the second factor of the topic today is, was Luka illegally parked? As described in the San Andreas Penal Code, Section 3, subsection I, a motor vehicle is illegally parked in city limits if it is parked in a place that is not a parking space, or blocking an alley lane, or parked within 5 feet of a fire hydrant. Luka, factually, was not parked in a space that is in any way, shape, or form identified as a parking space, as there is not a legal definition as to how a parking space is identified or what a parking space is. Common sense must be used. I believe.
All right, Mr. Google, that's a very interesting point. And here's my concern. I think everyone can agree, and I think even you would admit that a law that does not articulate a clear rule is something that affords officer discretion. Is that right?
In most circumstances, I would agree. I do have an example of another law that this could apply with, if you'd like to hear that.
Let's get back to that. I'll keep it in your pocket, but I want to follow this thread of reasoning for a second.
Go ahead.
I think something that Luka is trying to argue here is something that the court absolutely should consider, which is if this comes down to officer discretion about when to apply the illegal parking citation, as opposed to, doing so more consistently, and I think this is probably a big frustration with people in San Andreas. Doesn't this create opportunities for officers to unfairly target specific individuals with citations of this nature? If it's going to be our ruling today that, you know, you could apply this in every circumstance, but as we all know, this is very uncommon citation.
I completely agree that it is an uncommon citation. I believe that is because of the way the law is written. I'll have you know, for insight, I have sent in a recommendation to legislation to change the wording on illegal parking. But the reason I'm here today.
But do you see my concern about, you know, potential not to put too fine a point on it, but we'll call it malicious prosecution just so everyone understands what we're getting at. Shouldn't that be a concern for the court?
What specifically? Officer discretion being used so openly with this charge?
So if this citation is like almost never issued, and then it's only issued in specific circumstances, shouldn't we be concerned that it's being deployed against individuals that law enforcement finds unsavory, as opposed to, you know, applied broadly against the populace?
Can I speak frankly, Your Honor?
Certainly.
I do not believe that law enforcement should really be held to that extent, as if the individuals that are being held accountable for this could simply take it to traffic court after identifying and receiving the ticket. That's why that system exists. If they believe that law enforcement are misusing...
No, that's a perfectly good point. I was hoping you would make it. All right, so let's follow that thread of reasoning. Very good. Let's say we do come to traffic court, okay? What would be the standard that you think we should apply when determining whether or not this was malicious prosecution? And then, you know, under what circumstances should we throw out a ticket, even if based on your proposed application of the rule, it would be facially valid? You see where I'm going with this?
Absolutely. I believe that there, on every single city block, there is identified parking spaces.
No, I understand. Don't get me wrong. Let's say the rule is facially applied as valid. You know, let's say that under the circumstances, the court should find that illegal parking did apply, but the argument is simply that I was, you know, specifically targeted for abuse by officers, and so under that basis, you should throw out my ticket. How should the court consider those cases? What standards should be applied?
I think at the most you could question the officer on their intent and use your authority to make decisions from that point. But I do not believe that this is the I don't believe what you're suggesting or saying is a problem. And if it becomes a problem, I think it can be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. It's just important that we, you know, similar to Mr. Luka, I want to follow the thread on the logic all the way down and understand the potential unintended consequences of any potential policy change that may result from our decision today. You know, I imagine that if we find in Mr. Luka's favor, then perhaps we'll see an increased incidence in people parking in the same way that he did. And I imagine that if we find in your favor, then we'll see an increased incidence in illegal parking tickets. And I want to believe that officers would apply this standard, you know, judiciously and fairly and consistently across the entire population. But I think you could agree that it's likely that people are going to cry foul, regardless of whether or not the officers did so in good faith. And so it's important for this court to be able to consider, okay, if we go down this road and people do start crying foul, what should we do about it? Especially if it leads to some volumes. You understand?
I do completely understand what you're saying, Your Honor, and I think that if there is an increase of parking tickets and those contesting said parking tickets, I think that this appeal and the previous case that this appeal came from is important case law as to just identifying whether something
I think we agree that it's important. I think we agree that it's important. Don't get me wrong. No concerns there. All right, you can keep going. I've satisfied my logical threads.
No worries. Thank you, Your Honor. So I just wanted to go over that the multiple ways to identify a parking space that is on every single city block, if that's okay.
It's your time.
Of course. So if you on any city block within Los Santos, you can see parking lines on the side of roads. there's some outside. There's parking lots that are common. There's a parking lot or a parking garage on, again, almost every single city block, if not every other city block. There's signs. There's parking meters. There's no law that enforces parking at parking meters, but again, they are there to signify signify that there is parking there that you can park.
Sorry, to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, would you say that under your proposed regime, a parking meter is a sufficient but not necessary condition of being able to legally park?
I think that there is no law that states that you need to pay at a parking meter, so it is no different
I
than a
understand,
sign
but, like,
saying you can park here. Yes.
Well, that's what I mean. Is a parking meter, from your perspective, evidence that parking is permitted in a location?
Correct.
Okay, all right, great.
All right. I do want to say as well, I want to give an example of another situation where something is mentioned within a law, but not legally defined. And that is robbery. Robbery is a charge that law enforcement charge people with on a daily basis, maybe more than a dozen times a day. It is one of the most common crimes that are committed in this state. Robbery describes money or goods as the objects being taken. Money and goods are not defined in our penal code, much like a parking space. But we all know what money or goods are. We all know that. If we went through, as Mr. Luka is stating, and every single noun needed to be described in our general laws and definitions, we would have a mess of a penal code. Every single branch of our laws would have a headache at every single case if we did not apply common sense like we need to do with parking spaces in this current time. Can they be defined? Go ahead.
This is an interesting point, Mr. Gilgully. But let me put it back to you this way. Isn't sort of what we do in court adding definitions to these words? Aren't we sort of getting there inevitably anyway?
You're absolutely right. I'm just saying that there is nothing stating what it is previously, right? I do not have case law to say what a parking space is defined in a courtroom, so we have to do it here
I
today.
I understand. Right. Sorry, what I meant was your point about it becoming unwieldy. I mean, I think it's sort of going to get unwieldy inevitably either way as we proceed down the road of history in San Andreas, right? Eventually, I imagine we're going to have enough test cases that we do end up defining all these terms. And perhaps actually it would make more sense to have a glossary section of the penal code or what have you, so that those definitions are codified and easily accessible, as opposed to being, spread out across judicial opinions. I would hope the state legislators are attentive enough to engage in that kind of thing, and for the benefit of the public. But I just want to make the point that an undefined term now doesn't necessarily mean that it won't be defined in the future. And to that end, Mr. Luka made a very interesting argument. You're familiar with these red curbs across the city?
Absolutely.
All right. So similar to this whole item about parking signs and lines and things of that nature, I have a very interesting question for you. What is the point of these red curbs?
I do not know. It is not defined in our laws, to my understanding. They sometimes mark loading zones or sewer grates, stuff of that nature, but there is no legal definition or nothing disallowing you from parking there.
I agree that there is no legal definition of the red curbs in our penal code. How do you think people generally understand the red curbs?
I think people assume you cannot park there, but I am of the opinion that there's nothing legally stating you can or can't, other than the fact that it is most likely not identified as a parking space via the
but the city obviously spent some effort on painting these red curbs, right?
I'm sure at some point they did. It might have been when the law was different and maybe red lines were included. I haven't been here my whole life, so I'm not sure.
Oh, that's fair enough. For your benefit, I'm not aware of any time when the parking definition relied on the red. I mean, I think we can all agree that parking is not permitted where the red lines are. That seems obvious to me. But part of, I think, the concern here is I think the public to some extent understands the red lines to be This is a judicial canon of construction. It's essentially if you say one thing and then remain silent as to the rest, then you imply that you've excluded the rest from the definition of the one thing. And in this case, that's sort of how people understand the red lines to work, which is that, you know, the red lines define areas where parking is not permissible. And then if there is no red line, then people assume that they can park elsewhere. Now, I take your point. I take your point that parking spaces are defined in the penal code and yada yada yada. But what do you recommend the court does about this whole red line situation? How do you think the court should interpret this when establishing its ruling here today?
I hope that the court interprets the law as it is currently written, and not what there is marked out on the streets of San Andreas, because I think we can both agree there's a lot of traffic infrastructure that does not make sense on the streets. I think what we have to go by.
Oh, that I agree with, certainly, Mr. Golgoli, certainly.
On that note, I have a question as well.
Of course.
So it was brought up by Mr. Luka about the use of police resources on vehicles who are, they may not be abiding by what is written in the penal code, but they're not obstructing traffic. They are not doing anything otherwise illegal beyond the illegal parking. How do you feel about the police resources being used on vehicles like that versus vehicles that actually are impeding traffic and you said like extra of that?
I personally believe that the law enforcement have the right to pursue whatever crimes they are presented with. Obviously, our discretion is limited when it becomes felonious, but that is not the case today. Discretion is a powerful thing. It's a powerful tool that I pray that every officer uses appropriately on the day-to-day. I do not think that the need to measure, and if I can I don't know if I'm allowed to use any of my rebuttal time now, but if I can bring up one of Mr. Lucas'
Oh, you don't get
now.
rebuttal time, Mr. Gilgoli, so you just go into it.
Okay, I will start going into one of the Lucas points then. First and foremost, he states that 2 meters from the edge of the car to the center of the road is more than enough space. The average semi-truck is 8 feet wide, or approximately 2.6 meters. So his proposal already does not allow for wide load vehicles to pass, just based off of that being said in of itself. So I don't. As far as what I think about the proposals made by Mr. Luka in regards to how this law should be perceived, that's one of the main clerical errors that I heard today.
Okay. Specifically, I was asking, do you think that the court should look into, is it currently the way things are worded, using up resources that don't need to be used? We understand officer discretion, but they are going based off what is written down, the law as it is. Do you think it would help preserve any, police resources, for that to change, or the way we view parking and illegal parking to change?
I think with the way that it currently is, it would be a waste of police resources to have to measure every single angle of a car for an illegal parking ticket. If we are not able to visually use our discretion to say, is that or is that not a parking space, especially with the way I've personally defined it here today, then it would take too much time for something as simple as an illegal parking ticket to process these. It's not exactly the most efficient way to do things, in my opinion.
So you do believe the way it is set up currently, it gives officers, it's easier on officer resources, so they do not need to specifically, I guess, like you said, measure every inch, and they can just visually say this is not a parking space, so therefore this is illegal, and I can proceed to my next steps in getting it handled.
Yes, I would say with the lack of description of what a parking space is, I do believe, as I've said before, common sense of, is anything that identifies as a parking space present? If yes, it is legally parked. If no, it is not legally parked. Or if it is within space of a fire hydrant or blocking an alley, of course.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and so under that proposal, Mr. Gilgully, if we start getting these cases, and I imagine that we will, where someone says, well, the place where I was parked had such and such indicator of it being a legal parking space, a legal, not an illegal, to be clear, that it was allowed to be parked there. How do you think we should start considering these? Because I think one concern that the court has is we're going to see a volume of cases about defining parking spaces. You see the issue?
I would perceive that as a benefit for the courts and our officers. Personally, I understand that it might be. I think that it either needs to the legislation can either get ahead of it and define it for us, which I have already proposed. I believe well over about 2 months ago.
All right.
Or the obviously the courts will have to make these decisions, which is why case law exists.
Oh, certainly, and I mean, it's not that we don't want to do so. We're just trying to anticipate exactly what the parties are contemplating. You understand?
I completely understand.
All right, perfect.
How much time do I have, if you don't mind me asking?
You got 7 minutes and 15, 14, 13.
Got it. Okay. I'd like to just go over a few of the points that Mr. Luka made today. First and foremost, he stated that he was arrested for illegal parking. He was not arrested for illegal parking. He was arrested for failure to identify. Any infraction, any suspicion, any reasonable suspicion, any idea that law enforcement has any idea that someone will or is going to commit a crime, they can be identified. Failure to identify is a charge that exists, that has jail time. He was arrested for such. I also want to mention that we mentioned a parking lot across the street up the road. I also wanted to mention that there were parking meters up the road approximately 15 meters north of where Luka was originally parked, which I also pointed out at the exact same.
I have a question about this, actually. As the court is going to have to make these determinations. All right, so if there's no marked space, but there is a parking meter, would that be legal to park? Would that be
in
permissible?
my opinion, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And
I'm just trying to anticipate all of these potential, this like grid of choices,
Sure. Mr. Luka also mentioned that we stole their car, and that's why the car could not testify. We did not steal it. We sent it to Hayes Automotive with no fine attached, which he could have, not because he was detained, but it wasn't stolen. It was simply sent to somewhere he could publicly access, which we could have gone if he wanted the car to testify, if the Honorable Judge Doc Hillard wanted to entertain that. So I just wanted to go over those points while they're fresh in my mind.
Thank you.
Very last thing I want to go over, that Luka was parked directly next to a fire hydrant. I understand that it was not measured. That was never my point in the original case. I would say that it is approximately maybe 5 to 6 feet away, which is over the legal limit, which is why it wasn't my main argument. I didn't measure the distance from the fire hydrant. But I will say, based on the photos that were originally submitted, there was not enough reasonable space for a fire truck to use that fire hydrant if it was needed, which I believe is the spirit of that law. That's the entire purpose of those fire hydrants to be used. And if there was not enough reasonable space for a fire truck to use it, his car would have been towed or driven through by by fire and rescue. That's just how it works. They have a legal authority to do that if you park too close to a fire hydrant. They're not going to take their time.
What is the process for driving through it, by the way? Do they have like a separate vehicle other than the fire truck that they use to like ram it? I'm very curious about this.
I don't know their procedures. I just know that I've seen it where they will move your car out of the way forcefully.
I believe that. If it's an emergency. I believe that. No doubts there, Mr. Gilgully.
Right. I cannot speak on fire and rescue's authority, SOPs, or procedures. I just know I've seen it firsthand.
I was curious if you had first-hand knowledge. That's all.
If there are any questions from the court, I'm ready to answer. But at this time, I insist that the court upholds the charges, reaffirm their authenticity, and I want to thank you all for your time as well.
Miss Day Kavanaugh, Miss Clarkson, anything?
I kind of have more questions for Mr. Petrov.
Oh, you're gonna have your time. Don't worry. I just want to know if we got anything for Mr. Gilgully.
I do not.
No,
all right, thank you.
Do.
Thank you, Mr. Gilgully. We appreciate your time.
You as well.
Mr. Luka, you can come back to the podium. Mr. Luca, you got 5 minutes. Your time will start when you begin speaking. And just so you know, we will still ask you questions during this time.
Okay, I have a few points just to make. So he said that the parking in front of the courthouse is okay in his view. So, he's just going again from his view, not what law says. They wouldn't take your ID in the bad faith. They would definitely try to get my name in the bad faith, even when I didn't do anything. We all know money is the thing. Common sense in parking space, in my opinion, is place where you can park and not block shit. Get the red line into the illegal parking definition. To your points, less resources, paint will stick, and you can get it away. Waste of police resources. So you are saying you are not willing to do the work properly? Measurement of the fire hydrant was not his point, but that was apparently the reason why I was found guilty by the judge. Just saying, he wrote it in his statement as well. And if something is in the spirit of the law, why is it not written in the law? That's it, thanks.
All right.
Oh, you can.
Mr. Luca, out of curiosity, you understand that the court can affirm for any reason in the record, not just what the judge said. Like, we could find that maybe the judge's reasoning we didn't necessarily agree with, but that we still find the result the same, right?
Hey, you do you. I'm just,
Okay. I just want to make it clear to you because you admit that you're not a lawyer. So, we're trying to be helpful.
Yeah. But him saying that it was closer than 5 feet, but it was not measured anyways, it, kind of a bullshit if you ask me.
I understand.
Oh, yeah, and one more thing. When he said, sorry, Mo, I will not try to pronounce your last name. I know better than that. But in his opinion, so why would his opinion be more valuable than my opinion?
I assure you that we consider everyone's opinions equally, and we go with what we think is best for the state based on the legislature's intent.
Yeah, no, I'm just, saying that in his opinion, the place is legal to park in front of the courthouse, but it's just his opinion.
No, I understand.
Yep, that's from me. Unless you have any questions.
You had one, Sonny?
No, I would change my mind. I don't see the need to ask these questions.
I think you should ask them. We've got time.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, I will ask these questions, Mr. Petrovic. If
No,
we
please.
go back to your definition, parking with 2 meters to the center of the road. In your definition of illegal parking, would then parking on the sidewalk be legal?
Parking on the sidewalk? That's crazy. Unless there is a sign telling you to park on the sidewalk, then there is difference.
So your argument is there must be a sign no matter what?
No, that's not what I say.
So next question. The smaller vehicle obviously would have more space on either side. So are you asserting that the smaller vehicle would be having more right to park wherever they wanting, so long as it is...
Okay, hear me out. I was speedballing numbers on the place in 20 seconds, okay? I don't know.
Also, you did assert, in your opinion, illegal parking is not blocking shit.
Yes, that I will agree on.
Okay, perfect. So, if we are going to be based on your opinion, what is the purpose of the pinnacle?
For it to be specific? Question mark?
Okay.
So do you think every law, there's no room for interpretation and spirit of the law if it's not written exactly in a certain way, then
okay,
it
Willow,
should
what is
not
your
be taken
definition of
any other
spirit
way.
of the law?
I think to interpret the intention, what is, good and safe and not like unreasonable. So like if someone obviously like let's say you for instance are saying, you know, they had no right to call the courthouse a parking space because it does not specifically have outlined like white lines or defined as a parking space, correct?
Sorry, Willow, I cannot talk to you anymore. It's been over 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna. Well, you can answer the question, Mr. Luka.
Oh, I forgot. What was the question, Willow?
Are you defining that because in front of the courthouse, as you brought it up, that it's not a parking spot because it does not directly have the white lines that was like stated earlier that defines a parking spot?
No, in my opinion, it is parking spot, but it's the same thing, you know, with the other places that don't have markings.
It is not the same though, is it?
I think these are very good points by all sides. We've exhausted our time, and I understand the Chief Justice is interested in the timeliness of court cases. We are going to try to issue an opinion today. If it's going to take more than, let's say, 20 minutes, then we'll come back out and tell you that we're reserving ruling, but try to get it up today. But maybe we'll be able to get that opinion out shortly. So I appreciate everyone's time. Court is now in recess.
So are we supposed to stay here, or can we go around about our days?
You can leave if you want to, but if you want to hear the potential ruling, then you might want to stay.
Oh, say less.
It is this way.
Yeah, I forgot.